everybody, this is Kendra from Cooking Classes with Brad, and if you're wondering what this thing is, Micah is joining us today for this cooking tutorial. Today we're going to be making profiteroles. Now, don't panic at this fancy word. Profiteroles are basically a cream puff that have a chocolate sauce poured over the top. Super yummy, super easy, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So to begin, we're going to preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, once we have that done, we're going to start making our choux pastry. A choux pastry is pastry dough that you cook on the stovetop first. We're going to basically incorporate all the ingredients, cook it up, then it will go onto the pan and be baked in the oven where they will puff up. Here we have our butter melting on a medium heat. We want to melt the butter before we add water so we don't end up with any evaporation of our water before we want it. So let's melt this down and then add our water in. Okay, so now our butter is completely melted and we're going to add in 1/2 cup of water. And bring this back up to a boil. Our water has come to a boil, so I'm taking it off the heat now, adding our 1/2 cup of flour, our sugar and salt mixture, and we're going to mix this up vigorously until it all comes together into a dough. Just mix, mix, mix. And once we have it in something that looks something like this, a dough of sorts, we're going to put it back on the heat. Medium heat, and we're going to mix it for approximately 1 minute. What we're looking for is for this dough here. Here's our first dough. We want it to look nice and smooth. It's going to form into a ball, and there's going to be just a little bit of a film left on the sides and bottom of the pan. As you can see, our dough is formed into a nice ball now. We have a little bit of a film on the bottom of the pan. So right now I'm just mixing the dough to cool it down a little bit before we add our eggs. We do not want scrambled eggs in the dough. That's no good. So we want them cool enough that the eggs aren't going to start cooking when we begin incorporating them. As we mix our first egg in, the dough is going to start to break apart and look kind of funny, okay? Don't panic. That's normal. Putting our second egg in, we're going to mix, mix, mix until it's fully mixed into our dough. And what we're looking for is a nice, smooth, slightly runny dough that looks nice and shiny. Okay, so just keep mixing until we hit the point where it's nice and smooth and all mixed into one. Okay, so now we have our dough nice mixed up very well. As you can see, it has a nice sheen to it. It's a nice kind of slightly runny dough. And what we're going to do is take 2 spoons and start spooning it onto our baking sheet. Now this baking sheet should have either some parchment paper on it or a silicone mat, and I have some nice silicone mats here that I'm going to use. Okay, we're going to take 2 teaspoons and just put about a teaspoon of dough each for each little puff onto our mat. Give them a little bit of spacing because they are going to puff up. So here I just have a little bit of water. I'm just dipping my fingertip in it and smoothing over any little points here, so that we don't get little burnt bits on top of our cream puffs. Choux pastry, the word choux in French means cabbage actually, due to the shape that they take when they bake. And it's obviously not spelled like shoe that goes on your feet. We're talking C-H-O-U-X, choux pastry. So I've put the cream puffs in the oven at 400 degrees. Now, depending on whether you're using a convection oven or a regular, just at-home conventional oven is your time difference. For me, I just have a normal stove. I'm putting them in the oven, 400 degrees for 15 minutes. Then what I'll do is I'll turn it down to about 325, give them an additional 35 to 40 minutes, and that lower temperature will dry out the inside of our puff, making a spot for all of our cream to go. If we're talking convection oven, you need about half the time. So when I'm using my convection oven in our big kitchen, what I do is about 6 or 7 minutes at 400 with the fan turned on low, and then we're going about 12 to 13 minutes, okay, at 325. So cuts the time for baking way down. Once we've done that, we're going to let them cool down, and our next step is making the cream. Okay, so our second step is to make Chantilly cream. Chantilly Cream is a whipped cream that is flavored, and traditionally it's either with a vanilla or brandy. We're going to be using vanilla for this purpose. And a couple tips to help your whipped cream whip faster. Chill your bowl first. I put mine in the freezer for about 15 minutes beforehand. We're also going to be using 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar, which will help stabilize the cream so that when you actually use it, it won't melt quite as fast, okay? It'll stay nice and stiff. Okay, so I have 1 cup of heavy whipping cream into the bowl. And I have a teaspoon of cream of tartar plus our sugar. Now, sugar, you're just going to go by taste, okay? It really depends on what you enjoy. So put however much you want in. I usually use about 1 to 2 tablespoons per cup of cream. So we'll add that after the cream is actually whipped so we can decide how we want it to taste. We're also going to be using some bourbon vanilla. We're going to be using about a teaspoon. For whipped cream, it's all about the taste. Just do what tastes good. In goes the vanilla. In goes our cream of tartar. And we will add the sugar as we go. I usually start out on low speed and then bring it up to high as it begins to whip. Okay, our whipped cream is done, and for this we want nice stiff peaks, which means our cream isn't really moving much of anywhere. Sorry, the shiny bowl doesn't really want to show you well. There we go. Okay, so see, it's really not moving. You could even like tip it upside down. It's just sticking. Okay, so that means our cream is ready. We're going to set it aside, stick it in the fridge, and make our chocolate ganache sauce. Okay, for our chocolate sauce, it's really easy and basic. All you need is 1/2 cup of your cream, 3/4 cup of either semi-sweet or dark chocolate chips. I have heated up my cream in the microwave for about 45 seconds. You can also do it on a double boiler. Either way, you just want to make sure your cream doesn't get too hot so that you end up with a film on top. Okay, so we have our cream. What we're going to do is take our 3/4 cup of chocolate chips. Right into the cream it goes. We're going to mix this around until our chocolate is completely melted. Then we will add 1 tablespoon of butter to give it a nice sheen and glossy finish. Our cream puffs are out of the oven and fully cooled, and now we're ready to cut them in half horizontally. And what we're going to do is fill them with some cream and pour some nice chocolate sauce on top, and they'll be done. Here's what they look like out of the oven. I have a little knife here, and I'm going to be cutting the Choux Pastry puffs in half so that we can fill them with the cream. Now sometimes you end up with a little bubble that still has some of the wet dough in it, and just use your finger to pull those out if there is any of that in your puffs. Okay, now we're ready for our Chantilly cream. So I'm just going to take a nice spoonful of it, put it in half of our puff, and stick the top on. Just enough so that you can see it on the sides. Okay, now I've reheated our chocolate, and what I'm going to do is just take my spoon here and drizzle it on top. This 1/2 cup of cream to 3/4 cup of chocolate chips gives a nice consistency where it will run over the sides but not all fall off of the puff itself.